Yo, my name is Henry Confidential, and this is There'll Be Horror. We are a few weeks behind, had a little bit of personal stuff behind the scenes that we got squared away, and we are back. So obviously, our quote unquote new release of today is a little bit behind in terms of relevancy, but time is relevant, anyway. So with that said, John, how do you feel today?
Feeling good. I watched these movies, like I said, a few weeks ago, but they're still pretty fresh in my mind. No pun intended. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about them. And yeah, it's been a while, but we're gonna get back on track. So thanks for tuning in. Let's get going.
Absolutely. So these three movies are three movies that you personally said that either you've seen them all, either recent or already watched them a decent amount of times. So I'm very curious to see overall how you feel about them. But we're going to start off with our niche pick. So we're going to start with the niche pick. This is one that you brought up to me that I had a buddy who in my personal life, he's not in the community, even though I want him to be in the community, and I would love to do a podcast with him because me and him have some wild conversations. But he's brought this up to me, but him and you are the only two people who I've ever heard mention this movie. So I'll let you introduce it and give us a little insight on why you picked this one.
All right, so the niche movie this week is Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon. It's a movie that came out. I mean, the funny thing is, like when I first saw this movie back when it came out in theaters in I think 2006. I went to a movie theater. I was the only person in the theater because that's like how little fanfare there was about this movie.
Yeah.
But I got to sit in a movie theater in East Orange, New Jersey, by myself and just watch the entire movie. It was a great experience. We talk a lot. Especially in like more recent horror films, like the mainstream movie we're talking about later falls into the same category, sort of. But there's a lot of like deconstructive horror that's come out in this 21st century. Like The Cabin in the Woods jumps to mind. The other movie we're talking about later jumps to mind. And nobody knows about Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon, which I feel does a deconstruction of the slasher genre almost perfectly. It's almost perfect. It just the execution of it and the fact that you kind of get two whole separate movies in this movie is just really well done. I'd like to hear just your opening thoughts on like what you thought about Behind the Mask.
So going into this, I'm not going to lie, I wasn't the most enthused, not because of any concept of this movie specifically, and definitely not from the word of mouth. I'm just not a fan of mockumentaries. Like I've seen This is Spinal Tap, What We Do in the Shadows, and Popstar Never Stop Never Stopping, and honestly, all those, well, What We Do in the Shadows is fun, but the other two are borderline bad to me, and it's just not my style. And it took me a long time to get used to like The Office, you know what I mean? So like that style is just not my jam. So going into this, I didn't know exactly what to expect, but as a very new but also beloved fan of horror now, and specifically the slasher genre, I went into this with expectations that were tempered, but also I don't know exactly how to describe them. Like it would, above mid range. And when I went into this watching it, I was intrigued from the jump because it's one of those where it acknowledges that multiple IP Halloween icons are real in this universe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things that, okay, how are they going to go about this? And luckily they don't try and, use that too much to their advantage. Like they weren't trying to be nostalgic, and they're not trying to be cheap with the joys of the film. It's the inspiration, and that's it. And honestly, if you look at the horror genre, a lot of it's inspiration, so that's no judgment there. So it's one of those movies that as it was going on, I was intrigued on what's going to happen, what's the point, and I didn't hate any of the characters. And I guess my only negative I will say about the movie is you can tell that there's not like a quality director behind the scenes, but the story is fantastic and the concept is actually really awesome. So off the jump, if I had to compare this to a movie, I would compare it to Tucker and Dale vs. Evil in terms of how it deconstructs like the horror genre of what it's going for. And this is actually a better version of this because of, even though the acting is purposefully bad in Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, so you're able to forgive it, it's still, annoying at times if you're not in the mood for that. Whereas in this one, all the acting is good. You know what I mean? They do a really good job, which you're really surprised because there's zero names in this entire movie in terms of like people of acclaim. Well, I guess technically two.
There's like two or three. I mean, if you count like obviously Robert Englund's in it, and then Zelda Rubinstein's in it briefly, and then Kane Hodder's in it very briefly.
Yeah.
But everybody else, I mean, I've seen a few of the other people. I think Angela Gothel's had like a run on on 24 for one season, but I really haven't seen her anywhere else. And Nathan Basil, the lead who plays Leslie Vernon, I don't think he's done very much else outside of like local stage productions and stuff like that.
Yeah, but hopefully he was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, he's fantastic.
Oh, another comparison. Another comparison to this movie is a Creep, and I haven't seen 2, but the first one I wasn't a fan of either. So like that also made me nervous of this kind of like, hey, film me while I do weird stuff. But it was just really engaging, and there's a twist. There's technically 2 twists at the end of this movie of a shift in tone and then just a plot twist, and they both worked for me, and they actually elevated the overall story because it could have. So without getting into specifics, the Nick Cage movie that just came out, it for the first 2/3 of that movie, it does the thing where it's making fun of itself and it's self-aware of itself, and then it makes fun of itself for the third act, but still does the cliche third act stuff that it's making fun of without doing anything different. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, I'm checked out by now, but I like the movie, but it doesn't stand out. Whereas in this one, it stands out because it's like, oh, this actually does not do the cliche stuff, and it actually has its own, identity. So I really respected and appreciated that. So I had a blast with this, and it's going to be rewatchable for me. I really
and since this is, and it is totally rewatchable. I've seen this movie like a bunch of times, and it's one of those movies like where you do pick up on more stuff as every time you watch it, which is really great given the fact that it really wasn't like a high budget, like well produced, like you said, even well directed film. Like I think it might be Scott Klosterman's first film. But yeah, but given that, you could tell there's a real love for horror, a real love for the genre, and an attention to detail, which upon rewatch you'll see a bunch. And I think the main thing about this movie really is like the beautiful thing about it is that tonal shift. And like, we can spoil it because like, this is a movie that's been out for, 16 years now. Like it goes from the mockumentary style, like Henry said, and then at, right, like 60%, 70% of the way into the movie, it turns into
a legitimate
slasher movie. And you've been set up with it's kind of like a behind the curtain, like here's how we do the magic tricks for the first 80 minutes of the movie. And then actually you don't know everything because for the last half hour of the movie, you've also been set up you've also been set up that things are not going to go the way he said it.
Double dipping.
It's really good. The tonal shift is just like, it hits you. And like, even like the beats, like when, the camera crew becomes part of like the victim, like that's it's such a tonal shift. Even when he chases the one guy down, and like you think, and
they have that little conversation, and he's like, "It's me."
Yeah, there's so many really really great parts of this movie. Like it's a shame that like this didn't get like more attention when it came out because I think this is a really really underappreciated, underseen movie.
Yeah, and like I kind of mentioned earlier, given that slight comparison to Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Tucker and Dale is one of those that has gotten that acclaim, so it's like it's a semi-cult movie, whereas this one is more of the niche. It's not quite cult yet, but it's definitely niche. But if it jumped out of that niche, like if it crawled out of that niche category, it would be a full-fledged cult movie because it's got everything that you would want to like, or even just be a great movie. It's just really underappreciated. I think
the thing of Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, I'll say two things about that. It's like one, like the fact that like Tucker and Dale vs. Evil has those two fantastic leads, Alan Tudyk and Tyler Labine are both just fantastic. So like that would have gotten acclaim anyway. Because Alan Tudyk is just anything he touches, everything he touches just turns to gold. So like that couldn't stay hidden. But the Tucker and Dale vs. Evil versus Behind the Mask versus, I'm going to say Cabin in the Woods as well. It's the same concept with three different approaches. Yeah. Like Tucker and Dale vs. Evil does like, everything you see in a horror movie they're just misunderstandings and accidents, versus Behind the Mask where everything is magic tricks, basically. They're all just tools of the trade, versus Cabin in the Woods where it's like technologically manipulated. Yeah. And like, I think watching all these three movies is like back to back. That would be a great triple feature. Oh, yeah. Those three movies.
And so they're all, fun fact, 90 minutes. So it wouldn't even be a long one. Yeah. Almost that entire triple feature would be the length, just a little shorter than one of the Lord of the Rings extended editions, and that's wild.
Jeez, that's 100% true. So, like, down to brass tacks, what did you rate the movie?
I didn't because little pull behind the curtain. I just finished it right before we got this, but so I didn't get a chance to truly think of where I want to place it in my heart, but. It's a good movie. It's 4 out of 5 stars. It's definitely one that I can see even climbing up. It's one of those where it's like, obviously on first viewing, it's not like, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. But if I ever buy it and I'm just sitting down and I'm just like, hey, I'm in the mood for a, I don't want to say turn your brain off movie, but one where I can just sit in the background, but also not like be scared because it's not also that until the third act. You know what I mean? I lead into it and I kind of sit back. It could become a constant rewatchable type of movie for me. So as of right now, 4 out of 5 stars, but honestly, if I did half stars, this would probably be a 4.5. Let's just be real. Like it's a
That's
high.
where I'm at 4.5, and the only reason why I dock it a half is just because of the faults of the fact that it is a lower budget movie.
Yeah.
I think if this was like if this movie was produced by like Blumhouse or something, like some crazy studio, oh my god,
Yep.
this would be like this would
that's one thing I was thinking. I was like, obviously this type of movie only has the true love that it has because of when it was made. But also, if this was made with a little nowadays, like similar to like X that we just talked about, where it's like had that production and also like just people behind it. Oh my God, this would be a banger. But I mean, it pretty much is. So I mean, that's just saying something. Where it's like, as great as it is now, imagine what it technically could have been. And that's one of those things that's like it's an unfair judgment, but it still is a fair judgment technically. So
and something that you touched on that like we didn't even talk about is like, yeah, it isn't like as far as like pound for pound scares is Behind the Mask a scary movie? Not really, because like they've built up this like basically he's a goofy comical character for the first.
I was gonna say that does have a decent amount of laughs in it too.
Yeah. And it's funny and it's clever and it's smart. It's really smart. And then like when it turns, you're like, holy shit, this dude's for real. Like, so it does get a little scary. And like,
there actually was a small smidge of a moment where I was like, is this the dupe that he's been setting them up to like film them, and then they're just making a movie and he's not actually killing them? Because at that point, because then you realize the plot twist of why it did what it did. But like there was a second where I was like, when he was like, you can go, you know what I mean? I thought that was him like, oh, let's just keep them distant so I can pull the tricks and they can film the stuff or what, I mean? I thought there was a chance of that. And then I'm like, nope, people are dying. But there was a chance where I was like, oh, this might be a movie inside a movie inside a movie. And that would actually have been really cool too. So
another thing is like they've been, this is one of those movies where it's like, there's fans of it. There's a real like ground swelling. They want the sequel. It's open for a sequel. There's a mid-credit sequence where it's open for a sequel. And I've heard like, rumors of like scripts being kicked around, and I do believe that everybody would be on board to do it. So like, I don't know. I hope they eventually do it. They could do it. The plot I heard kicked around was that they were going to catch up with Leslie like down the road where he has the Eugene character and he's teaching people, which I think would be fantastic if they did it.
So I as you just said that, my first instinct was like if we got a sequel to Nightcrawler, how he's like, oh, I have this big crew now and I'm set up and I have this plan and now I'm going to kind of teach you guys to be like me. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, oh my God, because he's still got that personality, that quirky personality, and he'd be like a horror icon cultist. Like it would be weird, and I would be cool with that. Or just, I don't know exactly what else they would do, but yeah, I would be down for a sequel. Let's just put it this way. So I'm glad you introduced me to this, and I'm glad you technically made me watch it. And it's a big recommendation for me. And obviously, if our description of it, if you're even half on board, give it a chance, because it is better than you would expect in terms of a movie that you probably never heard of, a movie with a low budget, a movie with not many actors in it of name. So it's more surprising of the quality that it has. It's got a weird charm like Clerks, how it's like, wow, this, with as little as they did exactly what they're going for, and it was tight and it worked perfectly. So I recommend.
My sales pitch would be like, if you love horror, especially if you love like 80s slashers, like the core of like, horror as it is, watch this movie. If you think those movies are stupid and predictable, also watch this movie. Like, because it will appeal. It appeals to both groups, which is hard to do. It is for both. Take your friend that hates the horror the most and make them watch this movie with you, and they will appreciate it. I guarantee you.
And obviously, it's going to be a decent segue because I'm going to kind of name drop, but it's not quite 1996's Scream in terms of how it flips the genre, but it is one of those where it's like it's in that subgenre of horror where it's like it puts genre in the forefront in terms of like how you view horror, and it's like it's one of those where it's like it's self-aware, but it's also still a horror movie, and those don't happen that often.
Like meta self-referential horror movies.
Which our second movie, it is also technically a new release, but it also is the most meta of the entire franchise, Scream 2022. This is a movie that let's just call a spade. When it came out, where everyone's like, oh my god, I love this franchise, but like, why? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like they're
They're gonna keep doing this.
yeah. And then they did the name drop, Scream. So there that you go in with tempered expectations, potentially lowered expectations, and this movie's awesome. I love this movie. If you can get more in depth, I'm actually gonna let John take over most of this just because I talked about this recently on Let's Rank Stuff. Me and Austin, we talked about this, and this is my second favorite Scream movie. Like I've seen it 5-6 times already at this point. I watched it 2 or 3 times in theaters, plus a couple times at home. I've already put it in the background multiple times just to have it there. Like this is a movie that I love, tremendously. And I'm not quite saying it's top 100 right now, but like maybe it could. Like I love this movie. Like this does the stuff that I wanted to do. So let's see what your thoughts on Scream 2022, Scream 5, Scream.
Yeah. This movie on paper has a ton going for it for me. I love the Scream franchise. I love the Radio Silence guys. I love their shortened VHS. I love Southbound. I love Ready or Not. And it's the same, they bring that same kind of energy to Scream. So like it didn't detract from it for me at all. I liked it. I still ranked it very high. I enjoyed the entire movie. Some beats didn't land with me. I think some stuff, I suspended my disbelief a little too much in this movie. I do think they lean into some of the tropes, and like the whole scene with Wes when he's walking around his kitchen and the score will swell and then nothing happens. And then the score swells and nothing happens. I'm like, all right, fuck you. That was like a little too much for me. And it's like, that's why it cost itself a few points. But the real thing for me that pulled me into this movie, the motive of the killers is freaking gold. And that the motive of the killers is platinum. It's such a great little gem to throw in there. And we could spoil it. Basically, they are toxic. They're toxic horror fans. Fandoms. That's their motive, and that hits home. Like it hit me in the gut. I was like, oh, they're fucking right.
This is horror. This is horror Twitter the movie. Like what I mean?
It is horror Twitter the movie. I was like, these guys are right. I hope they win. I've never rooted for the killers more than I have in Scream 2022. That I'll say that.
I love how they were able to make fun of horror, but also Star Wars, because they were like, oh, I can't believe Rian Johnson ruined the last Stab movie. But and it happened to be Stab 8, you know what I mean? So like that's exactly what they're doing with Last Jedi. You're like, that's hilarious. Like it's one of those things that you have to. So this movie, Ready Player One, even the new Space Jam, like you have to be 100% on board with the fact that they're going to shove propaganda and nostalgia and meta-ness in your face. And if you are willing to accept that, obviously it might not all work. That's fair. But if you're willing to accept that, then you're essentially all in. You know what I mean? Obviously you might have your nitpicks in terms of like the general story, like the non-meta and the non, that propaganda type of stuff. But in terms of all that, if you're cool with that, then you're going to be at least at the bare minimum positive on the movie. And for me, I am all in on that stuff. Like I love Ready Player One. You know what I mean? I love that type of stuff because I just love how you can combine. That's why I like the Behind the Mask thing, where it's like you're making fun of these types of genre. Like we didn't touch on it, so I'll actually touch on a little bit how on the Behind the Mask, why they're joking about like why do you let them have sex? You know what I mean? So it's the last way at the time. It's what the last thing they're gonna do before they go out. Yeah, of course they're gonna let them get it on for a little bit, even though really in horror movies they're just doing it for the nudity and all that stuff. But it's like you're making fun of it, and similar like in Scream 5 or any of these types of movies, they're able to make it work, but still make fun of it, but still acknowledge and it. You know what I mean? And this did the tropes, but also not. You know what I mean? Like there's characters in this movie that are doing the thing where they're tripping and falling, but they're legitimately fighting back, and they're actually like not just helpless characters. Everyone has their own weight and their own purpose. And
that's like a calling card of all the Scream movies. For the most part.
100%. Yeah. And that's I guess that's a follow. This is the only one that wasn't directed by Wes Craven, and this is the one that obviously you felt that Wes Craven wasn't a part of it, but also it didn't like hurt it at the same time. Like it felt like a cohesive. Yeah,
it wasn't like the Friday the 13th series where like every movie has like a different tone and it's shot different, and like it's like, oh, who is directing it now? Like the Radio Silence guys definitely respected Wes Craven and watched the movies inside of that. There was no huge tonal shift in this movie. It was shot almost exactly the way Wes Craven would have shot it, I believe.
Except for in Scream 4 with that weird lighting and filter thing he did, but we won't talk about that right now. But yeah. So Scream 5, it's one of those. It also made me excited for X because of I don't know her name right now. Tara's character.
Jenna Ortega.
Yeah, Jenna Ortega, who plays
Yeah.
Tara, and it's like I really loved her. Like the opening scene, like it did one of two things. It was able to update that type of scene. So it wasn't the stabathon like it had been up to that point, because that would have been too stale, and too repetitive. So it pretty much remade the very first one, but in today's horror, and then in today's version of horror. And how she's mentioning the elevated horror, quote unquote, that's a trigger word right now in the horror community. It's like, what is that? Like, is it just good horror, elevated horror? Oh, you're saying ours is below X, Y, and Z. It's not the point. The point is how it's able to not just talk about slashers. It's actually talking about like the Babadook with the which is ironic, when we get into this movie, the family dynamic. So that covers the Babadook. Did they mention It Follows? They mentioned it.
Yeah, in the beginning she says it follows.
Yeah, and essentially, Ghostface follows them, so that works perfectly. You know what I mean? So it doesn't have to completely just be Friday the 13th and Halloween. So I love that it was able to spread out the genre and showcase that like not
and all... Hereditary in the sense that Billy Loomis's daughter takes on the mantle of being a killer.
In her own way, but yes, that is. Okay, so since we are spoiled a little bit, when that happens, were you expecting her to do a weird like turn and just become evil, or were you just expecting it to end, kind of the redemption, the final girl, but with the full?
I mean, the Scream movies, like when that's another one of the beats that's in the Scream movies. Like when the good guys finally get the advantage, they always like fuck up the bad guys.
Yeah.
Like that was coming.
Not in my movie.
The one thing about Sam's character that also was like, what the hell? Did we need to see the hallucinations of Skeet Ulrich? I don't think
I loved it.
I think he's great, but I don't think we needed that. That was if there was any tonal shifts, like that was a tonal shift. Because aside from the dream sequence in part 3, there really isn't any kind of like weird, like mental health, or like anything outside of what we can actually see and touch. Like,
and I think it worked for me because they did set up the mental health stuff with her doing the pills and her like the psychosis that they were talking about. So it's not like it was just out of nowhere. But I get what you mean in terms of the franchise. It's different. But I feel like, honestly, nowadays, mental health is just one of those things that needs to be discussed. So if you're able to fit it in your story and not make it feel ham-fisted, to make it feel natural within the character or within a specific plot line, like it works for me, and it's really worked for me, especially with how they did it. I mean, he looked fantastic. He was fantastic. It just, the dynamic, it was like, that, the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type of thing. He's like, come on, turn, but also, what are you doing? Get out. I mean, it did it really worked for me. But I definitely, that's one of the ones that I've never necessarily technically heard it as a criticism, but it's something that's always been brought up in terms of like, I don't know.
I'll level it as a real criticism against Scream. And again, like I still rated this movie pretty high. Like, I work in mental health, and I know that for a fact, if someone's actively hallucinating, they're not well, and they should not be out in public. So that means her medicine is not working, and she should go to her doctor and get that shit fixed. Like you should not be actively hallucinating. There's
also triggering of the trauma. So trauma does,
okay, there's trauma,
yeah. So this is a special occasion, but so obviously, like I said, this is borderline top 100 already for me. Like, I love this movie, so obviously it's a 5 out of 5 for me. Where's it at for you?
4 out of 5 for me. Just and like honestly, like it's just those minor beats that I just take issue with. Everything else about the movie is great. The pacing is fine. Like the kills are fine. It's like I said, my criticism is just like the mental health piece. They lean too much into the fake outs. Like there's too many fake outs.
That's fair.
Like I can appreciate the fake outs as they existed in 1 through 4, but this time, like, they knew what they were going for. Like, I loved all the meta stuff. I love the stuff within the stuff of Scream 5. Even the monologues about Scream, like, Randy's niece basically taking the mantle of Randy, that didn't bother me. None of those speeches bothered me. Just the actual cinematography score leading into the fake outs was a little too much.
One thing, since you mentioned the Randy's niece and nephew, it's one of those where I love that they were able to add diversity into this cast, but also not like shove it in their face. It was just like, hey, that's our uncle. his brother married our mom. Like, it's just, that is what it is. And they just left it at that, but they were still able to add the diversity into it instead of like making it a thing. You know what I mean? And I just love that. It's like, yeah, why wouldn't, yeah, that's life. That happens. You have a mixed family and it's no big deal, but like that's how you do it right in terms of just like, no, it's all about, whatever they want to, throw in there. It's like, I just love that. That's how smart that this movie is. It's updating it to the times while still not being, goofy and like, being a gimmick, you know what I mean? And ironically saying from a Scream movie, like in terms of like that stuff, but I like that. And I also loved how they had I don't remember his name right now, but Randy's nephew, like the boy, where when he was getting, when he like made it, you know what I mean? But like he got fucked up, but also that you can tell, like since I've seen it 5 or 6 times, I've watched closely. And it's like, it's not like a fake out where it's like, oh, no way he made it out. Both of them technically, it's like, no way. It's like, oh yeah, it works. Like I understand. Like it's the way the timing of when they leave.
Basically, it just the whole movie no, spoiler alert. The whole movie paints Amber as just being a really ineffective, shitty killer. Because like half the people she attacks survives. Yeah,
I guess I can ask you this question.
Yeah.
My only real, because after, like I said, 5 or 6 times, this is the only thing where because I've Hawkeyed this movie in terms of like the heights, the physicality, with the two, you know what I mean? And I all that was like, if it's not 100%, it's close enough that like I can just watch it and not think about it. It doesn't throw me off. I've only technically noticed it because I'm Hawkeyeing it. But the only one that actually gets me is at the very beginning when Tara gets the call and they're like, what, check your phone. And, it's Amber being watched. And I would have been cool with it because I don't know if the timing worked. Well,
I assume that was just a pre-recorded video.
Oh, that may
yeah. Like they just sent
it
her. It wasn't live.
Was it a FaceTime or a video?
It was a video. I assume there was a video file being sent.
Okay, but
that's how I explained it away because that Richie couldn't be there because Richie's in freaking.
Exactly. So that's what threw me off. So the only thing that would have worked for me if it was just her is if it was still the entire time, like if she just put it on a tripod and she was just she set it up to where it would do that, then I would have been like, oh yeah, that's really smart. But it was moving. You know what I mean? It was clearly being handheld.
I think that was if we're deconstructing how the killers did it, like clearly like Richie filmed a video of him filming Amber, and then Amber had it on her phone to send it to Tara.
Yeah, I guess I always thought it was a live thing, so that's what threw me off. But yeah, if it's a video, next time I watch, if it's a video, then my only complaint is gone. So, and it's not even a complaint; it's just more of a like, that could have been a little tighter. But like, yeah, I love this movie. Where's it rank? Where's it rank for you in the franchise? Because I feel like I'm curious now.
I think I had it. It's either 2 or 3 for me because it's above 3. It's probably above 4. And I don't know if it's necessarily above 2, but it's definitely not above 1. So I'd say it's either second or third. I'd have to really think about it. I'm not a big ranking guy, but I would say it's definitely like it's top half.
Try whenever I can.
It's top half. Once we hit part 6, it'll definitely be in the top 3.
There you go.
Sure.
Yeah, it's I guess that's a follow-up question. Do you think it will, and do you think it should develop its own trilogy or whatever they're going to do?
It will. And I can't see it not. Should, yeah. I mean, that was a fun movie. They didn't it wasn't like, oh, fuck, they're going to make another one. Like, it was good enough that they could legitimately justify at least one more. Now, should they parade out like Courtney Cox and Neve Campbell every single time? Like, I don't know. That's going to get, that got old for me in part 4, to be honest with you. Yeah. But so if they can make it work, there's they could workshop this and probably make it work.
It made 140 million, so it's definitely going.
Yeah. Like I trust the process, but that's what I trust the process of these movies by now. So we're gonna be like, what? And then they're gonna do something and be like, okay, fine, I forgive you. It's like being in an abusive relationship. It's kind of like, all right, I'll take you back.
Well, so I guess my question is, so the first 3 were all family related. In terms of the killer, technically 4 to an extent.
Yeah.
But 4 more went towards the fandom, that thing, and 5 played on that as well. So now, what can be a logical motive to technically warrant another movie? Obviously our leads, we would love our leads to be a part of it, but in terms of Ghostface's motivation, based on where the franchise has been, the first 3 are family related. Relating to Sydney, and then the 4th one also semi-family related, as well as the leading into the fandom and the popularity and all that stuff. And then 5th was 100% that. It was all toxic fandom.
I mean,
So
I could see it being like my pitch for part 6 would be like one of the main characters has to be the killer, like in the 6th one.
they got to turn.
I'm angling towards Gale being a killer in part 6. Just like, like Sydney, what the fuck? Look what, like, like this is your fault. Dewey's dead. If you're gone, this will stop. If you die, this stops.
Or she recruits someone, obviously, but she's behind it. She's the mastermind. She's the
I can see that.
Because obviously she's not fucking killing anyone. Courtney Cox. She's not old, but she's also too old. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right. I mean, they had Laurie Metcalf killing people in Scream 2. So I mean, it's not outside the realm of possibility. Like Courtney Cox and somebody else. I can see it being like Sydney needs to die, like to make this all stop.
Gale can be behind that, or she could be behind the attempts of that, and anything that's more of a personable kill, like an up close or a sneak attack, that's Gale, and anything needs to be physical. Obviously, her henchman or her.
Yeah. Like I don't know who the henchman would be. Like
you could find from Dewey's family, probably, to keep it in the family thing, where someone, she recruits one of his family members, tells him.
Oh yeah, because like Dewey and his sister are both dead because of this. So yeah,
exactly. So you definitely. Oh, that. Ooh. All right. Let's. We need to tweet this clip to them and.
Radio silence. Get at me. RIP on Twitter.
Let's get an EP credit and let's let's up the production on this podcast, baby. We're gonna be in studio after this.
Yeah.
But so I'm really excited that this actually paid off and that this worked for me, and I'm glad you liked it. So we are going to jump to our quote unquote new release. Like I said, we're a few weeks behind in terms of when it came out, but fresh. This is. All right, I want to ask you first. Did you know anything going into this movie? Did you look up anything? I knew like one. I knew there was like no spoil. I mean, this movie we're not going to totally spoil. No.
But you know this just by like looking at the promos for it. I knew there was a cannibalism aspect to the movie. Okay. That was literally all I knew. Okay. However, like, I think one of the best things about this movie, and is the fact that like. The title card doesn't even hit until like 40 minutes in. And you're like, oh shit, that's right. There wasn't even a fucking title card. like there are just really small things about this movie that are like really good. And Sebastian Stan is freaking fantastic in this movie. I can't say he's great. Like I was just like, holy crap, dude. He is perfect.
He is doing like a Christian Bale and American Psycho type of vibe, what he's going for. Because he's so lovable and he's so likable. But he's also so unhinged when needed to be, and he's also just a well-performed actor. You know what I mean? Like he's a master of his craft. Well, I wouldn't quite say master. He's not quite there, but he's really, really good. You know what I mean? So it's one of those.
This isn't Shakespeare, but he does great with it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those where it's like this only works because of how capable he was able to pull off the multiple tones and the back and forth and the scenes of when he needs to put his foot down, quote unquote, but also still be charming and lovable, and you understand his softness side. You know what I mean? And
he's just a businessman.
Exactly. And leading into it, pre-title card, you're falling for it too. Let's just without getting into spoilers, like you're falling for it. You know what I mean? And it's just like. I honestly, 20 minutes of this movie, I'm like, maybe this is just a romance.
Yeah.
I heard the horror, but I'm like, maybe that's just, them being nowadays, like, breaking up a relationship. That's horror nowadays. Like, oh my God, you guys are lame. No, it does shift, but it's one of those where it's like, it worked. And I'm gonna spoil it now. I rated it 3 stars just because I don't know exactly how often I'm going to go back and watch it. But like, this would be 3.5, like 3 3/4, like touching 4 stars. But if I ever watch it again, then I'll bump it up to 4. But it's just after I was done, by the end, I was like, I technically don't care anymore. Like I was missing like that care of like how it was going to end. But leading up to it, like the first 2/3, like I was in, you know what I mean? But like, I don't know, something about the last act kind of did one of those things where it's like, I don't know. I wouldn't say it like lost me, like it was negative. At that point, I was just like, okay, let's really get to where, the end and the climax. And that's my really only flaw, because I had a blast overall.
I rated it higher. I went 4.5 out of 5, honestly. I think all the leads were like real strong.
The acting was fantastic.
I mean, yeah, Daisy Edgar Jones, even the friend JoJo Gibbs, all great performances. Like, hell, even the bartender, like, who's like barely in it, just like when he's like gonna help, or he's like, nah, I'm not gonna help. You know, like there's a lot. Like, even the smaller performances are great performances. Like the other women, great performances. I'm not going to spoil anything about the movie. But yeah, all the female performances are good. Obviously, it's a female-directed, female-written movie, so all the female characters are written very strongly.
Yeah,
and that's great. But the third act, like the action choreography, I'd say was great. I found it was all they put together a very believable, like, you know, end to the action, and all the little tiny twists and beats that happen at the end are also all fine for me. And I got to say, just based on the strength of Sebastian Stan, like in his performance, it's a tight movie. I like that.
Yeah, and like I said, the only thing is, like, if I just don't know if I'm gonna go back to it, and I feel like that's how I'm gonna start distinguishing, you know, my ratings of movies. It's like, all right, if I think it's a good movie, then I'm probably gonna watch again. If I think it's a fine, serviceable movie, then I'm like, I got what I got out of it once, but like it doesn't really do nothing. You know, I don't have that desire to watch it. But if I go back and watch it, it's gonna shoot up because it is enjoyable. Like, I recommend it. You know what I mean? It's one of those where it's like, don't let me saying I'm technically in the middle and I'm on the edge like deter you. Like, I really enjoyed this movie. Like I said, it's well shot. That, like, the music and like the score is actually really good. Like, there's a lot of production behind this. It's a Hulu original, and it's like,
the cinematography is great. Yeah. Like, a lot of the shots are like really, really inventive. So
I haven't watched many Hulu movies, but it's one of those where it's like, wow, I forgot this is a Hulu movie. Like, you know, once again, halfway through, like, it's just, it looks amazing, and it does a really good job. And do you want to hear something cool? The cinematographer of this did both Midsommar and Hereditary, so I am not surprised.
What do you know? Yeah, again, two other movies that are shot great. And actually, I mean, we didn't mention this about Fresh, and this is not a spoiler at all, but in the entirety of the whole movie, it is a criticism of modern dating. Like, yeah, in a tight little package. So, like, that is also there.
I guess that also made it like a good thing too, because it so the difference of, like, I was really disappointed with Promising Young Woman because its points by the end of it was just like, hey, don't do bad stuff. But it didn't really go beyond that for me. Whereas in this movie, there's more emotion, there's more heart, and there's more, you know, levels to the arcs. Even though I feel like I didn't quite get the payoff that I would have wanted, but it was definitely like way closer than, you know, like Promising Young Woman. So like, I really enjoyed how it was able to, like, the very first, like, I really liked when she was on the date with the guy did something stupid. She was like, oh, I don't think it's gonna work. I was like, oh, you're an uppity bitch or something like that. It's like, whoa. Like, and it's just like, that's crazy that, like, that stuff like that does happen. It's like, and like, I've had a lot of friends who are girls where it's like, they tell me those stories. I'm like, Jesus Christ, like, guys are trash. And it's one of those where it's like, you can tell, you know, a story and, you know, a point of view of someone who's, you know, not you, essentially. It's providing that perspective and giving the representation, but it does one of the things where it also is still fun and lighthearted at both of it. Like, it does a good job of being still a film and not a lecture. And I that's why I really did appreciate that. So like I said, it's borderline of like, if I'm going to go back and watch it, but like, I recommend it. I feel like, you know, it's really well made. The director, Mimi Cave, has she done anything else? Nothing big,
I think this is her debut.
Yeah, or at least, you know, a couple short films and music videos. So yeah, I honestly, if you throw her name on something else, I'm at least going to give it a shot. You know what I mean? It's one of those where it's like, it's you know, similar to Everything Everywhere All at Once, how it was the Swiss Army Man. So it's the Swiss Army Man directors where it's like, oh yeah, I don't really know much about them, but I know, like, I like what they're going with this, so I'm going to give that movie a shot. And you take it with however you want. And it's the same thing. It was like, you hear that name, I'm like, I know that name, and I know that they were able to do a story that could have been cliche or could have been gimmicky or, you know, preachy, and it wasn't that. And it's like, I appreciate that. So I actually think that's a nice little theme that we've actually had, you know, on some of these where it's like, they could have gone too far with their gimmick or with their level of, you know, trying to be something else or trying to say something, and they toe the line almost perfectly on all three of these.
Right, there's definitely movies that have the same messages like this and Promising Young Woman that like go way over.
Yeah,
they go like I spit on your grave level like like man hating shit, which is fine, which is also fine.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, but that would not have fit here or with any of the.
Yeah, exactly. And I love the tone, and it's like that's I think that's what we were talking about earlier with the Sebastian Stan's character, where it's like he has enough charm to him that obviously at no point are you saying he's okay, like, and you're not like liking what he's doing, but it's like a
he has a sympathy to him, kind of.
yeah.
Yeah.
What's oh my god, the guy that Zac Efron played, Ted Bundy. It's like a
Yeah.
Ted Bundy thing where it's like, this guy's trash, this guy's terrible, but it's like, I unfortunately understand like why people would, you know what I mean? It's like, it's one of those where it's like, since this is a fictional character, like you have to write that and perform it like to the T, and they do a great job with that. And I commend it for that. So it's like, this is definitely a recommendation for me. I don't know exactly, I've seen, varying reviews of people of like, I don't know if they were checked out by the tonal shift, if the tonal shift is what checked them out, or if in general they're like, nothing really stands out. So I've seen mixed things. People
there are a bunch of horror movies like where like the biggest one in my mind, and I don't know if you've seen it, where it's like you're like, what the fuck am I watching? This is supposed to be a horror movie. Like this is like Audition. Like you watch that movie for like an hour and you're like, Jesus Christ, is anything gonna happen? And you're like, holy shit! Like it's like that's kind of Fresh is a toned down, gender swapped version of Audition. That's exactly what I would say. That is exactly what it is.
Which Audition has definitely been on my list for a while. So I since I'm really a fan of these, genre shifts, especially in the horror genre, I definitely gonna throw that up there. So, Fresh, like by the end of the year, since you rated it fairly high, do you think it's going to be? I mean, obviously you don't like lists, but just use your imagination. If you did lists at the end of the year, do you think that this would be like top 10, or you think it would, fight for that top 10 spot at least?
I think you're right about the whole rewatchability of it. I don't really rewatch stuff unless I have to rewatch it. So like I try to consume as much as I can. Yeah. So I just go by first impressions. But if I had to rewatch it, I feel it would drop. I don't think it's gonna reach like it would definitely be below X, and it might even fall below Scream.
Yeah.
So it's already on a bad path. I figure it would land outside of my top 10, given the strength of other stuff. I mean, Jordan Peele is dropping a movie. Scott Derrickson's dropping a movie. There's a lot of stuff coming out. Yeah. So like, I can't see it hanging on for the entire year.
So, and that, like I said, that's like my only criticism where it's like, it's you get it by the end, you know what I mean? And I feel like it doesn't like stamp the ending, you know what I mean? And it's like it's not a negative because it's not like it's a bad ending by any means. It's like I'm backtoeing because I haven't watched it in a couple of weeks, so I don't have like the specifics. So I don't know exactly what it was, but I remember when I was watching it, like I was in my mind, I'm like, this is borderline 3-4. Like how are we gonna stick the landing? And it sticks the landing with a slight stumble. You know what I mean? Like it technically lands it, but it doesn't like firm, and it's like. So it lands it, but it's like 3.5. It was, it was close, but I really enjoy it. So if you have Hulu, I highly recommend it. If you've never used your free, month or whatever, your free week, I wouldn't necessarily waste it on this, but if you can get a friend's login, I would give it a shot, especially if you like Sebastian Stan, because
all the Scream movies are streaming on Hulu right now too, so you can get in there and watch all the Scream movies too.
Oh, there we go. And then while you're at it, go ahead and check out Brad. But yeah, like I said, that's high praise. I literally, it's not quite the same, but it's more on the level of like, Christian Bale and American Psycho, of just that multiple conniving / charming / arrogant. Like he does it all. And I'll say one thing. It's not, I won't go into full detail, but there's a scene when you meet a family and you're like, how are we going to do this? And then it does something that you're like, oh, and you have to accept that for that decision of how it works together like this, you know. And if you accept that, then you respect it, because that's unfortunately real life. That's probably how something like that would go. You know what I mean? Where it's
the word Stockholm syndrome can be
exactly that. I didn't want to quite say because it might be, but yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. I'm like, all right, yes. And so I commend it for that, because you have to have the balls to go there, especially with the type of story it started off telling. So that's why I'm saying it's not preachy, but it does still have it. And I really appreciate that. So if I ever watch it, I'll watch it again. I'll bump it up to 4. But as of right now, I'm going to stick at 3 just because, I got what I got out of it, but I'm no negative opinions in terms of as a whole.
And one thing we didn't talk about is like, where can people watch Behind the Mask and Scream
Oh
2022.
yeah,
If they want to watch it, obviously Fresh is on Hulu.
Yeah, so Fresh is on Hulu. Behind the Mask, if you have AMC Plus, it is on there because that's how I watched it. Let's see if Scream is anywhere. Scream is on Paramount Plus. So boom, there you go. That's exactly how you can watch it. So Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. If you have AMC Plus, you can check it out on there. And obviously, all these are available for renting, but in terms of like free or subscription wise. So Behind the Mask on AMC Plus, Scream 2022 is on Paramount Plus, and Fresh 2022 is on Hulu. So I feel like that wasn't so bad for a couple weeks off. I feel like we the chemistry was just there. We were able to talk about these movies, and have a good time. This was an interesting combination. I feel like it all worked well together. Like, in terms of everything that we were going for. So far, we're doing a good job of bringing a group together. So because we took a couple weeks off, I don't know exactly what we're going to do next week. So we'll just, kind of just jump into it when we have it. So you'll see when you see the posters
best way to find out is, like the page, subscribe to the channel. If you like the page, you'll see the preview and you'll know what we're going to talk about. So you can be prepared.
I haven't updated on this, but yes, go ahead. There will be movies on Facebook. You'll have it on there. And obviously if you subscribe to this, you'll see me promote it more often. John, anything else that you're doing?
We're getting our league off the ground here on the There Will Be Movies channel. So that should be coming up in the next few. Look for that in the next few weeks. Look for matches dropping. We're obviously doing this every week. You'll see me around all the other movie trivia leagues. Eventually, those matches will drop too. Look around; they'll be there. I'll be on YouTube a whole bunch. In the next few.
You're becoming a name. You're becoming a name, John. People at this point, people aren't even going to need to know you as John Marr. It's just John. You're gonna be the community John. Ironically, there's not really that many Johns, that's weird because there's a lot of the same names. There's a lot of Jakes and stuff, but there's not that many Johns.
Well, there's at least one or two other Johns that I know about. With my team and Multiplex, 2 John, 2 Furious, me and John Petrovich are our team. And then I'm trying to be the horror guy in the community. So I've successfully through the Masters of Horror tournament, I've displayed my dominance. So hopefully people will just start coming to me for if they have questions. That's all I want. I just want
essentially what I did with this podcast. I was like, hey. I've officially had enough confidence to consider myself a horror fan. I know you're a horror guy. You want to have a horror podcast? You're like, hell yeah. No hesitation. Let's do it. So, so obviously you can check us out weekly here Mondays. Also on Wednesdays, myself and Austin Pezhal, we have Let's Rank Stuff. And as John alluded to, him, myself, and Will Cohen, we have grouped together and we're formulating a There Will Be Trivia singles league, which is going to be all triple threat matches, movie trivia with a point system rankings. The ranking standings. It's first place gets 2 points, second place gets 1 point. So there's instead of it being 2 losers, there's one top finisher, one mid finisher, and then one real loser or third place finisher, however you want to say. We also have the War Room, which I'm kind of thinking I want to do it like an impromptu thing where it's like, hey, if we're all just hanging out, let's debate a little bit and do some stuff. What else do I got? We have There Will Be Trivia Open, which obviously, if you're watching this, no one's watching this right now, but if you're watching this on the repeat, the next video after this one is going to be There Will Be Trivia Open, written by Jordan Pierce Owens. So go ahead and check that out. But that's just an open trivia, bar trivia style, movie trivia specific, movie trivia games, 3-on-3. So it's a lot of fun. So I don't know if I'm missing anything. You can check me out over on Movie Battleground. And
me too.
There you go.
My match drops on Thursday.
You might want to check me out first. Just saying, you get notes, but no, I'm just kidding. But so all fun and games there. Can't wait to see. We're gonna talk right as I press end of what we're gonna watch for next week. But until then, you'll see us next week, and make sure you do, because guess what? There will be horror. Boo!
Booga booga.
Definitely gonna work on that.